Yeah, it's late.
Okay, I'm very sorry for this delay. We've had some technical issues as this happens in digital projects. I'm very sorry about that. I hope that you can all see us and that we haven't lost any of our audience. I would like to say a warm welcome to the third of our series of CINE Talks. Today the title is What is Successful Co-Production? I'm the project manager of CINE, a 3-year digital heritage project. My name is Anna Vermeeren and I work for Museum Nord in Northern Norway. Museum Nord is the lead partner in the CINE project, and with us we have 8 other project partners in Iceland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Norway. These are both heritage and cultural organizations, as well as innovation institutions such as universities or multimedia companies. The focus of our project has been, to a large extent, on using and developing digital tools to bring knowledge about outdoor heritage sites to different audiences. And in each country, we've been working on different case study sites involving local people, both in the content production, but also in the testing of our tools. And today's topic is just about that. How do we involve people successfully in the making of history? During the first year of our CINE project, we came together in Scotland and we started talking about collaboration and volunteering and community engagement and co-production, all these buzzwords that are around. And very early on, we noticed that there was quite a big difference in thinking between the Scandinavian countries and the British Isles, where these sort of engagement practices seem to be much more part of an agenda within the museum sector. And this was very fruitful, a fruitful start to our collaboration and knowledge exchange within the project. So we've been testing different ways of working and also producing guidelines for best practice. A lot of work of this work has gone on in work package 2, which is led by Scully in Iceland and also run by Donegal County Museum and Ulster University, all of which we have here today on the panel. We also had Timespan from Scotland coming in with a wealth of knowledge on this topic in particular. But I will say no more. I'm looking forward to the contributions from our partners and from our external speakers. It's great to have you all here today. We have spent many hours talking about this in the CINE project, so 90 minutes is not so much. I would now like to introduce Niall McShane from Ulster University, who will be moderating today's talk. Niall is a CINE partner and a PhD student and has really been essential in the CINE co-production process. Over to you, Niall.
Thank you, Anna. So hello, I'm Niall. Yeah, so I'm from Ulster University and I'm working with the Intelligent Systems Research Centre. So we're a technology institute. And on this project, we've been one of the innovation partners. And over the last few years, we've been working on heritage innovation and working closely with museums and heritage. And Judith, who's going to give a talk today, been working very closely on community co-production on the work package that Anna detailed. So I came at this project from a background of technology and hadn't really worked in heritage before. So this has all been a learning experience for me, and learning about co-production over the last few years and being involved in it and seeing examples of it and working with people. It is a very people-based practice. It really changes your kind of mentality and thought process about how you deliver technology or how technology works with people. So all those topics will be covered today. And so to define the concept, so co-production is the kind of practice of the delivery of public services, but looking at it as citizens being involved in those services and how you empower people to use tools they can access, or you involve them in the process of creating a project. So that works across many different sectors, but in the heritage sector, looking at how the role of museums and how they can be more participatory with the public, and how citizens can be more involved in telling their own stories. And so a lot of that we've discussed over the last few years, and it kind of comes down to the notion of authority and who controls the outputs in heritage, whether it's from the museum or the heritage professionals, or how community can be involved in those projects. And so there's kind of core concepts that we're hopefully be discussing today, and it's around like the conception of co-production, the design, the steering, and the management of heritage and history. Let's see. So we have 3 speakers today, and so I think so. First up, we have Judith McCarthy is going to speak first. So I worked very closely with Judith on a number of case studies, and we've just recently published our community kind of co-production website with all our tools and resources and guides to how we kind of created this work. So Judith is going to speak first. Then we have Sarah up. Sarah was talking about co-producing the Danish Welfare Museum. So from a more social and kind of activist perspective on a museum and talking about social change. And then we have Dominique, who's talking about a film project and an iconic heritage site. So first up, I'd like to introduce Judith McCarthy. And I'll just hand over to you, Judith.
Thank you very much, Niall. I am now going to share my screen, hopefully. Et voila. As Niall said, my name is Judith McCarthy and I'm the curator of Donegal County Museum. And today I'm going to be talking about cultures of co-production and initiating co-production projects in Ireland within the CINE project. This is the first time I've actually given a presentation in this form, which is kind of peculiar for me. I'm used to having an audience in front of me, so hopefully it all goes okay, fingers crossed. So first of all, the CINE project, as Anna and Niall explained, we have a number of partners in Iceland, Norway, Scotland, Ireland, and Northern Ireland. And for anyone who's in the audience who doesn't exactly know where we are, you can see from this map here, there's Ireland, and then you'll see a little icon that looks like a Greek temple. Well, that is Donegal County Museum, which is in the northwest part of Ireland in the county of Donegal. And this is the museum. Donegal County Museum is based in an old workhouse building dating to the 1840s, and we have been operational as a museum since 1989 and work very closely with communities within our own area of Letterkenny, which is the main town in Donegal, but also with communities throughout Donegal. So in the CINE project, we are working most closely in our work package with Iceland and Northern Ireland. And we have been working particularly closely with Ulster University. One of our main outputs is a best practice for cultural heritage co-production projects. And our resources include best practice manuals, online resources, and training for cultural heritage co-production projects. And the aim is to enable organizations to build successful community-based and sustainable projects, which will empower local communities to record, research, preserve, and present their heritage using digital technologies. So that's what the aim was. So now I'm just briefly going to talk about what is co-production. Niall has already given a kind of a brief outline of what co-production is, but it is underpinned by the belief that outcomes are better if those concerned in it are involved. So whatever that is, and you get it quite a bit in the kind of healthcare sector, and it means, for instance, patients contributing to the provision of health services. It means working together from the very beginning, and I'll explain a little bit more about that as I go through the presentation. Co-production confers more power to those participating. The process itself is co-determined, and the result should be a project that is truly co-owned. So why should we co-produce? Well, co-production gives a voice and is responsive to the needs and interests of local communities. It provides a place for community engagement and dialogue, and it helps to develop skills that will support community goals. Also, from the point of view of museums, as we all know, people have turned to other sources for entertainment, for learning, and for dialogue. And that, unfortunately, is not always museums. We need to reconnect to our communities, because really our main aim, or certainly the main aim of my museum, is to work with our communities in order to preserve and communicate the story and the history and the heritage of my community. So we need to reconnect with them, and we need to reimagine our role. We also need to encourage sustainability, not only for ourselves as museums, but for communities. So we started on the CINE project with a case study in a place called Killybegs. And you can see from the photo there that Killybegs is a fishing community. It's one of the largest fishing ports in Ireland. It's based in southwest Donegal. And we specifically chose to work with the Killybegs History and Heritage Group, and specifically on a site called St. Catherine's Church and Graveyard. You can see a photograph of us there in the early stages of the project. They're a very small but enthusiastic group, and they had undertaken a huge amount of previous research on the site of St. Catherine's Church and Graveyard. So what did we do with them? We compiled a historical archive using the previous work and research that they had undertaken to help understand the site from a local perspective. But because of the project that we're working on and this idea of using digital technology, we also added new content. For instance, in data collection, we looked at 360 photospheres. We started small using very accessible technology and created easy to understand guides. The history and heritage group that we were working with, as I said, were a very small but enthusiastic group and very committed. They were also, as is often the case with history and heritage groups, of an older generation. I mean, so we needed to start off with simple technology that they would be able to use. Otherwise, we were going to lose them. There was absolutely no point. With the photogrammetry, for instance, we focused on mobile technology over high-end studio-based setups and demonstrated what it would be able to do and what they would be able to do themselves with the technology. And we've ended up with the virtual stcatherines.net. All of this work was devised and developed with the University of Ulster, and Niall led out on all of this. The virtual stcatherines.net contains all of the data and research that the History and Heritage Group in Killybegs had gathered over a long number of years. It also contains a 3D model of the church and an accurately measured graveyard environment, which is based on all of the research that they had gathered. It contains a selection of 3D digitized artifacts that we worked with the community to gather, and also a St. Catherine's VR, an immersive virtual reality experience that Niall has been working on over the number of years of the project, and which we hope to have further developed, possibly by the end of the project at the end of this year. So this is sort of the end result of our work with the Killybegs History and Heritage Group. But there were some challenges. As I said, the group were willing and committed, but they were also very, very busy. And through the first couple of years of the project, we found that it became increasingly difficult to continue their involvement in the project because they had other things in Killybegs that became more urgent for them. looking at the development of sites in the town. They're very concerned around the balance between development and preservation of the history and heritage of their town. And also, we didn't begin at the beginning. One of the keys of co-production, one of the main things that you need to do in order to successfully co-produce is you need to begin at the beginning. And we did not begin at the beginning with the Killybegs History and Heritage Group. So we decided to start again with a second case study. And we began at the beginning. We appointed an experienced facilitator, and that unfortunately is just a photograph of Guy. He couldn't be with us. This is Guy Bowerscale, who has worked in the area of co-production in the arts and culture and heritage fields over a long number of years. And we chose to work with a community on an island off the coast of Donegal. It's actually in Lough Swilly, which is a fjord in Donegal, and it's linked to the mainland by a causeway. And the reason we chose to work with Inch Island was because it was a very rural and isolated community. It's also a mixed community from the point of view of its history and heritage, and also has a very rich history and heritage going right back to prehistoric times. So what did we do with the Inch Island community that was different to what we did in our first case study? Well, Guy started off by doing some initial research of the history and heritage of Inch himself, so that he wasn't going in completely blind to the community. But he also connected with the community. He began in January of this year, and he literally went out onto Inch Island, walking the island, meeting people, knocking on doors, and talking to them about the project. And we asked them what they wanted. We held a meeting in the community centre on Inch Island. We advertised it locally. We told everybody what we were doing with regard to the CINE project, and that we were interested in their history and heritage, but not specifically saying what we planned to do, because we didn't really know at this stage. And that is part of the point of co-production. So we held a public meeting, and as you can see from the photographs, lots of people turned out. And we asked them what they wanted. And we listened. We asked them, what was it about their history and heritage that they wanted to tell people? What were the things that they were interested in? What were the things that they felt that they wanted to share with, in the case of the CINE project, the rest of the world? And Guy worked with them between January and, well, unfortunately, until COVID became a problem, about May of this year, gathering photos, archives, artifacts, and listening to people. And the end result was inchheritage.org. Now, we didn't know what the end result was going to be when we started on the process. It was more about actually the process itself. We had thought that possibly we might end up with an exhibition, but we didn't really know. But this is the end result, was inchheritage.org, which contains all of the stories and photographs and archives and information that the community provided Guy with, and we have put it on inchheritage.org. We also produced a co-production guide written by Guy, which is a practical guide to how to do co-production projects. And Guy came up with 10 rules of co-production, which I won't go through now, but you can find them in his co-production guide. Also, we have, as Niall says, put everything in one place. So CINE Communities is where you will find our co-production guide. You will find both of the case studies. You will find all of the digital technology guides, all of the things that we have developed over the 3 years of the project in terms of assisting communities in using digital technology and doing co-production. So what did we learn? Some of the things we have learned is that you must, as I've said before, work together from the beginning. There's no point, co-production is nothing if you don't start right from the beginning. And I mean before you even have an idea of what it is you want to do. You can't start Well, you can. I mean, you can co-produce an exhibition, but it's not really co-production. It's more about collaboration because you already think you want to do an exhibition. Co-production is taking a step back from that and just going to the community and saying, we know that you have a wealth of history and heritage. We want to work with you to preserve that and to promote that. How are we going to do that? And that's around having a joint vision and goals. It's important not to have any preconceived ideas about the outcome. As I said at the beginning, you as a museum curator or as a museum professional might think, well, we might end up with an exhibition, but you might not. You also need to manage both your own expectations and the expectations of the group, of the community that you're working with. You must trust each other. That's really, really important. And again, it speaks to what Niall was saying around authority. We have always assumed from more years than I care to think of that we are the authority on everything to do with history and heritage. But when you go to work with a community, you realize that actually, in a lot of instances, they know more than you do about their own history and heritage. At the end of the day, they are their stories to tell. So we need to trust each other. They trust our expertise, as we do have expertise in areas, and we trust theirs. You have to listen actively. And I know that's very easy to say, but it is so important. Again, it's around this idea of not assuming you know everything and not having any preconceived ideas. You should accept that the road will be bumpy and that the direction might change, but that the journey is as important as the end result. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's not about the end result. It's about the journey that you make with the community. And the photograph I have there is of one little change, slight change that we made in our journey when we realized that we weren't actually addressing young people at all in the project. So we took a little bit of a detour briefly in June of last year, where we worked with a group of young people in a place called The Loft in Letterkenny, and did some workshops on photogrammetry and talked to them about the project and got their feedback on what we were doing. So I'm throwing a question out there, out into the world of Facebook. How would co-production work in other countries and with other cultures? As Anna said, we've discovered, as we've gone through this process over the last few years, that although co-production is something that has worked quite, they're working quite a lot on in the UK. We're starting to work on it here in Ireland. In the United States, it's quite common to co-produce. And clearly we're going to hear now from Sarah from the Danish Welfare Museum, where they have been co-producing for a number of years. But it isn't necessarily something that comes naturally or would come naturally to other countries and other cultures. So I'd be interested to hear from people out there in Facebook world what they think about that. And finally, I just want to thank everybody for giving me the time today to talk just very briefly. Hopefully, if we have some questions, I'll be able to talk a little bit more about what we have been doing. I also want to thank all of the partners in the CINE project. This is a photograph that was taken when we had the partner meeting here in Ireland last year. Unfortunately, Anna herself wasn't able to make it, but maybe sometime in the future she will get here. But these are some of the partners that we have worked with and some of our colleagues who have made the journey so interesting for us today. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Judith. Yeah, so that is a really important question and something that has been discussed a lot throughout the project as we've worked transnationally, is that the culture of co-production and how we think about it in different countries is very different. And from my perspective, working on this, it's nice to see the contrast of the two case studies, because I think the first one, I think maybe like I was very biased towards what we're trying out technology with communities, and we did a lot of work in the university, to kind of extend it and present it better than a community would have done by themselves. But the second case study on Inch Island, I think it was just a great experience to witness Guy working on the ground, going door to door. I think by the end of his 3 or 4 months, he could have moved in to Inch Island And I think he was on a first name basis with the whole community. So that was really powerful to see how that came together. And I guess there's a lot more discovery in that case study too, where he really uncovered the history of the island, and I think it was more reflective of the community and the people, and it was nice that we had that contrast. So thanks again, Judith, and I'll just introduce the next speaker now. So next up we have Sarah from the Danish Welfare Museum. So I will hand over to you, Sarah.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me along. I'll also just share my screen and cross my fingers that the technical issues work. It seems to be working. So I'll just introduce myself first. My name is, of course, Sarah Smet, and I am the head of the Danish Welfare Museum, which is situated in the very middle of the quite small country of Denmark. I'm gonna use my presentation here to hopefully give an insight into how we have been doing co-production for a number of years at this site, which is a preserved poorhouse in the city of Svendborg, the best preserved poor and workhouse in the Nordic countries. But co-producing is the very essence of the museum, and I hope that when I finish my talk here, you'll hopefully agree with me, and if not, please do ask me questions. So I'm from Denmark. I'm a Danish person, and I represent a Danish museum. And in the global world, Denmark is known for a number of things. I've just put in a few things here in my small presentation. We are the birthplace of the welfare state, the Nordic welfare state. We also have famous writers and fairy tales, and we have quite well-known beer. And we're also a very liberal country, being the first place that permitted same-sex marriage, just to give an example. Just to be a bit provocative, I could say here that there maybe, just maybe, not all is well and as idyllic as it can seem from the outside, from other cultures looking to Denmark. We are a very privileged country with quite, compared to other countries, equal living standards, but not all is well. And I wouldn't say that something is rotten in the state of Denmark, but I will say that we definitely have issues that we are dealing with in contemporary times. Inequality is rising, and so is the number of homeless people living on the streets, and children and families living in poverty, just to give a few examples. So we have a Danish Welfare Museum, which is situated in a historical setting of this last preserved poorhouse, which was built in 1872. And we have issues in Danish contemporary society that we need to debate, and we need to hopefully change for the better and all do our bit. And that is what we also do at the museum. So this is the site. This is a contemporary photograph. And these are some of the people who would have been living in this very place. It was women, men, seniors, and it was children, all of whom would be placed here, for example, for unemployment, poverty, illness, and not fitting into ordinary society. The point is that we are now using this site as a sort of a time capsule that combines the past and the present to debate the future, and we do this in co-productive manners. So this image is from the last year, but I could have chosen any number of pictures from 2020. But this is him, like one of our collaborators, one of the people who we do co-production with. And I have a small film with him, and I'll just share this with you, and I'll get back to you in 2.5 minutes.
For hver gang jeg har været her, der er det egentlig givet mig mere og mere lyst til at komme tilbage. Og så får jeg tilbuddet om at få en udstilling hernede. Og det er nok prikken over i til, at de er lidt lykkelige i dag.
Når vi her på museet på Danmarks Forsorgsmuseum, vi skal fortælle om de mennesker, som har boet på fattiggården historisk set, så har vi et stort kildemateriale, vi gerne vil bruge. Men det her kildemateriale, det mangler en helt speciel ting. Det mangler individets perspektiv.
Jeg har i hvert fald opgivet tanken om at komme ud og udstille på et eller andet tidspunkt under mit misbrug, hvor min misbrug er tiltaget så meget, at jeg egentlig har opgivet alle forhåbninger om nogen, som kan kigge igen og få et normalt liv igen.
Vi ved ikke præcis, hvordan det har føltes for at være på fattigdom. Det er der ikke rigtig nogen, der har bevaret. Der er ikke nogen, der har spurgt dem, hvordan har du det egentlig. Og det vi så har valgt at gøre i stedet for, det er faktisk at alliere os med nutidens eksperter, altså mennesker, som lever i Danmark i dag, men som har nogle af de samme problemer, nogle af de samme sociale problemer, som de mennesker, der kom på fattigdom havde.
Og fortælle historien er en meget helende proces. Det kan være grænseoverskridende at fortælle den, men det bliver også nemmere og nemmere for hver gang. Det fjerner faktisk alt, hvad det her stofdrang. Efter x antal gange at fortælle en historie, hvad det handler om.
Når vi får dem sat i spil, så kan vi lige pludselig få en individperspektiv på vores historie, så kan vi lige pludselig få følelserne frem. De er simpelthen ikke til stede i det historiske kildemateriale. Derfor har vi valgt at samarbejde med en del mennesker, som vi kalder autentiske eksperter, som hjælper os her på museet faktisk med at kvalificere vores viden om socialt udsat, både historisk set og i dag, men så også går ind og faktisk aktivt formidler historier af fattigdom. Og det gør de i et projekt, som hedder Fra udsat til værdsat.
Hvad jeg får ud af at være med i projektet, der tror jeg har egentlig fået lyst til at komme tilbage til livet. Det lyder meget, meget hårdt, men for hver eneste gang, der jeg har været der er det givet noget mere og mere.
So thank you for Henrik. I hope that you know that that sharing this video is a big thing, both for the museum, but also for me as a person who collaborates with Henrik and so many other of the people who we term the alternative experts with lived experience, with authenticity, and who with whom we co-produce the very museum itself. And how do we do this? We make sure that we address contemporary issues. We make sure that we are engaged in public debate, looking into what themes, issues, problems, thematics, what is on the agenda in contemporary society, and then we do we join them with our historical knowledge, and with this combination, we then qualify with our alternative experts the socio-political future of the welfare state of Denmark. What we also do is create what we term what I term a very paradoxical safe place for unsafe stories. I say it's a paradox because the Welfare Museum in itself, the site, the heritage site where it is set, was, before it was a museum, a place where you would lose your freedom, your civil rights. You would be locked in just like a prison, and for a lot of people, this would happen for decades. You would be excluded from society. And it's a paradox that we today at the museum are turning this upside down and saying we can use this heritage site as a prison to understand and to debate and be provoked, but also with the very in the very environment that we are creating, we will create a more safe place to just also share not only the positive stories of the welfare state, but also the stories connected to the more darker sides. We also make sure that we are relevant. We need, if we want to co-produce a museum with these authentic experts, with the people who share their lived experience with us and who challenge us into seeing our historical, for example, knowledge in new ways, it has to be relevant to them. if we are not relevant, we are not important, and if we are not important, they will find somewhere else to spend their time and energy with. So we need to be relevant. And this image is from this, the anniversary of the Danish street paper called Hus Forbi, another version of this big issue, which a lot of you will know. And the vendors themselves co-produced a exhibition that was both in the museum itself, but also toured Denmark, because it was relevant to them. And in this way, they, with us as the historical professionals, as Judith also said earlier, we all have our specific competences. And for them to be involved in our work at the museum, and for us to be involved and looking into what is relevant for them, in this way, we are in combination strengthening what I would term a socio-historical and socio-political consciousness of the welfare state. And why do we do it? Why do we do it in the first place? We do it because historically, these are the people or the men who has been written the welfare history. It is the warden, it is the head doctors, it is the politicians who formulated the reforms, and it's their voices who which is historically represented in the historical archives. And what we want to nuance this. This is also part of history, but we want also Vibeke, who you can see here, her story to be part of our, all of our knowledge about the Danish welfare state. Vibeke herself was in an institution as a child and as a young person, and has shared so much wisdom with us from her individual perspective of her lived knowledge. And it is empowering both her, but also us as museum workers and curators and colleagues of her. And in this way, we share our authority. It is not just us as historians or curators or educators who say we are now setting the scene and putting this on the agenda. We are asking also, what do you want to have put on the agenda? So we are not only beginning together, we are thinking together and creating together to get these ideas. And that is so empowering for these people who are all former care leavers, who have been in institution as children, just to give an example. But it's empowering also for us, and that's such a one of the really valid points I want to make to you today. That is, this is not just for somebody, this is also for us as a museum. And what we are also stressing is that we have to create a forum where people feel safe, not just to be given a voice or be given the opportunity to speak, but to take it themselves. And this is Mette, one of our authentic experts, who herself is also again and again and again taking center stage for the first time in her life, which is, well, it's awe-inspiring for a person like me and so many other people. We do socio-political initiative, and this is pre-COVID, you can see. And this is us joining together the local community, authentic alternative experts, people with lived experience, and the politicians saying, let's meet up in this heritage site and debate the future of the welfare state on the basis of contemporary issues and historical site. And we are obligated to do this. We have made an obligation to ourselves as an institution that we will not forget. And in Danish, this on the top of the very entrance to the museum used to say museum. Now it says, we will not forget you. And that is an obligation that we continuously are reading and remembering, because working together with these people can not only be in projects, it has to be in the very institution's DNA, and has to be in the very long run. And when doing this, we can create a fellowship. This is also pre-COVID, but this is for me such a moving image, because this is an abundance of people who met at the museum, took over the museum because they wanted to honor that we are there with them for the long run in working for social justice in some of these issues that we, as I mentioned earlier, are still struggling with in Danish history. And then what? This is all good, and I'm sharing this, some might say, glorified image of what the Danish Welfare Museum does. Well, it is the truth. I haven't misled you. We are actually making change, and we're doing it together. But we haven't reached our end goal. We are continuously doing this because we are an activist, we are a social political museum. And we are working in the museum for securing welfare rights. And in this way, the very notion of us working project-based for welfare rights, but in the long run with these people who are sharing their knowledges with and wisdom and insight with us, is the very DNA of the museum. We need to continuously secure this forum for a critical debate and dialogue, because that we have a golden opportunity in museums, in these co-productive way of looking at things, to have this forum, because that is not it's not very many other places in the contemporary society where you can have this forum. So we need to really keep that safe, and we need to challenge our power relations, both externally in the welfare system itself, but also in the museum itself. And we have to explore how can we be useful. And this is the point in a new book. You can see the cover of it on the I don't know if it's left or right for you, but bottom side, and it's this book. It came out this year, and it's ours and a lot of international colleagues and experts' thoughts on how can we create social change while using the museum as a resource, but how can we do this while looking at how can we be useful? And this is Johannes, and this quote is from yesterday, and he said to me, because I was saying I'm going to do this presentation today, what do you want? What do you want to co-produce a message that I can share with you guys? And he said, remember that solidarity is the key, and without it we are all lost. So I'll finish with Johannes, one of our alternative experts, wise words, much better than mine. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak, and I hope that there are questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was an amazing talk. Yeah, there's so many issues that we've been thinking about the last few years that was really nice to see how effective and powerful a museum can be, and how the roles are changing now, and that it can really be a place for voices and a forum for people now. That's something we've kind of witnessed over the last few years, and one of our partners, Timespan, as well. I'm sure they'd be very interested to have a long discussion about solidarity and how they can achieve different goals. And I also thought that last year in Ireland we had the Irish Museums Association conference, which was about engagers and how we can be engaging to the people now. And I thought that was a really amazing example of that working in practice. So we'll just move over to our last speaker now. So our last speaker is Dominique. We'll be talking about transforming the future of the past, reinterpreting Stonehenge. And this is a film project, and the link to the films and all the content will be up at the end as well. So Dominique, I'll hand over to you now.
Great, thanks very much. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see how it goes. So here we are. I don't know if you can't see the full screen. I think you can minimize looking at all the speakers in the side by hitting a little minimizing button. But there we go. So my name is Dominique Bouchard. I'm head of learning and interpretation at English Heritage. And I'm going to talk to you about one of many youth engagement programs that my teams deliver very recently. Initially, when this conference is going to take place in Norway, I was going to be co-presenting with one of the young people who produced the film, but unfortunately, unfortunately, we're not in Norway right now, and also unfortunately, she wasn't able to get out of school. So I think her teacher was happy to send her on an adventure, but I think that under the current circumstances, so if you can please forgive the lack of participation by our partner. It's not our fault. There we go. So what I'm going to do in this paper is really explore the relevance of the opportunity and potential of co-production at of interpretation at a World Heritage Site, particularly Stonehenge, to transform the experience of all of the visitors, especially those for whom the traditional heritage narratives feel exclusive or kind of irrelevant. So my talk is going to look at a case study, which is a collaborative film project called Stonehenge 3019. So Stonehenge 3019 was conceived, created, and produced by young people aged 11 to 16. And the young people involved lived near Stonehenge. And at the start of their project, were sort of aware of Stonehenge as a local tourist and heritage attraction, but they didn't really feel any sense of connection to it or see how it could be relevant really in any way to their lives and experience. So for them, Stonehenge was just a place, and in their words, that lots of people visited for some strange reason. So so this is all part of English Heritage's National Youth Engagement Program called Shout Out Loud. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of a background to that so you can understand what the aims of Shout Out Loud are and what it is. So this project and Shout Out Loud is about empowering young people to tell their own stories. It's giving them the reins, it's giving them the support they need, opening up heritage in a way to them that is new and different and puts their lives and ideas really in the foreground and puts the control in their hand. It is, so an English Heritage, in case you don't know, is a national heritage charity. There's a little map on the right-hand side of your screen. We have over 420 sites across England, and my teams oversee all the exhibitions and interpretation at these sites, as well as our National Youth Engagement Program. We get about 10 million visitors a year, and around 360,000 school children visit our sites to partake in educational, sort of formal education activities. But one of the things that we found out and we realized was that young people really weren't connecting to heritage. If you ask people, young people were interested in history, but they felt that the histories that were curated by the national heritage institutions didn't really speak to them, didn't really have anything to do with them, and they felt really disconnected. So we got some funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, which in the olden days was called the HLF, to do, we got about £1 million to work with a consortium of partners to deliver a massive national youth-led program. And the sort of the number one words you need to look at are in the fancy script, but the idea is that we're going to transform English Heritage from an organization that sort of takes a very top-down approach to storytelling. We're going to tell you what you need to know. Lots of it's going to be about architecture, possibly also about stones, not so much about people, to an organization that really centers youth voice and where we start listening to young people, but also thinking about what are the stories that they're interested, how do we uncover and tell new stories, and this strand of untold stories is really important to us. We have a lot of programs at the moment that are kind of amplifying the unheard voices from our sites, whether that's working class history or Black history or LGBTQ history or women's stories or the stories of children. And these are incredibly important parts of the lives of the people who lived and worked in these places. And often you just hear really about the soldiers, the kind of the rulers, whether it's a king or a queen, and sometimes and again a lot about architecture. So how do we make heritage relevant to young people? So we've done about a year's worth of work here, and this just gives you a little overview of a snapshot of what we managed to do in the first year. We had about 3,000 young people involved in digital events, including a digital festival of archaeology. We have paid placements as part of it, and grassroots and community youth activities. The main thing really is that we're trying to support young people all over the country in engaging with their local heritage, whether it's at one of our sites or not. And it's in that context that we have Stonehenge 3019. So this was a youth-led project, which resulted in a new piece of digital interpretation for Stonehenge that explores the idea of heritage itself and how a place like Stonehenge can be meaningful for people everywhere, both today and in the future. And so it's so the idea, so we are, as an independent charity that curates all of these sites, it's pretty revolutionary for us to take a group of young people and take a World Heritage site and kind of let them loose on the interpretation. We've given them the support, and we had the sort of traditional engagement trifecta of the experts, the local communities, and the creative partners. But actually, what's different about this time is that the creative partners and the experts really were informing the young people, so that the young people can make the key decisions about what stories are being told, how they're being told, and the message and the approach to interpreting Stonehenge that they wanted to take. So, you know, this kind of traditional approach sort of turned a little bit on its head, is what I want to draw to your attention to, and is what I think actually makes Stonehenge 3019 so exciting. And it's kind of really simple. And the idea is that the young people who created the film engaged very closely with their own sense of the site. And rather than focusing on the history of Stonehenge or the site or anything, or trying to retell it in any particular way, they chose in the film to focus on the lived experience of Stonehenge over its 5,000-year period. And that long history was really of people visiting Stonehenge, and they found that incredibly inspiring. And that was the aspect that they really wanted to explore and frame their own perceptions, and frame in light of their own imagination about the stones had been perceived by others, you know, since the Neolithic period. The sense of wonder that they had wasn't so much about the stones themselves, but it was rather the connection that they perceived with all of the people who visited Stonehenge before them and in the past, and the ideas and the sort of fascination that people have had over the years with Stonehenge's mysteries, and they wanted to showcase that. So the result was this very interesting collaboration with the curators and archaeologists whose job it is to tell the true history of Stonehenge, and the filmmakers whose job it is to inspire and create people. And they created this 15-minute film, I don't know if anybody's watched it yet, that constructs a future vision of Stonehenge, where that sort of looks back in time to Stonehenge's various pasts, both the real ones and the imagined ones. And to do that, the young people drew from their own lives. So the group that we worked with was children of soldiers in the British Army, and they'd moved around a lot in their lives. And so this idea that, so lots of them didn't really have a connection to any one place. And they felt a bit like aliens visiting Stonehenge, and that idea is actually brought out in the film, and I think a really clever way. And although they didn't really feel a special sense of connection to Stonehenge in particular at the start of the project, they knew that it was a world famous. They knew that it was a place that people from all over the world and potentially the universe made a kind of pilgrimage to. And they were fascinated by that. And they were really curious about the different motivations that people had to visit. However, once they got to Stonehenge and they met the team and the artists, that's really actually the kind of magic began. So for the young people and the artists, they didn't really know much about the site, aside from the fact that it's Stonehenge and people go there very early in the morning on the summer and winter solstices to watch the sunrise. And that gave them kind of a real sense of freedom. And as historians and archaeologists and curators, we didn't sort of lock them into, okay, this is the period that you have to focus on, or this is the history of this particular stone, or they dragged these stones here from Wales and wasn't that difficult. We kind of let them loose, and it was a real sort of creative collaboration between the filmmakers and the young people. And I think that was important because they met each other sort of as equals and on equal ground. And it gave them that space to collaborate with each other and to dream up some stories. So the group said that one of their quotes was, it was like the best playground they could possibly have. You're not allowed to stand on the stones, though. We don't let you do that because they're very fragile and delicate. But it was definitely this idea that they had this amazing special access to this area that the public normally can't get into. And they were empowered to just kind of respond to it without too many restrictions. And so again, rather than focusing on the straight history, the young people really wanted to be imaginative and think about all the strange and wonderful theories that people had about Stonehenge, And then rather than shutting that down, which is what you normally do when you tell a history story, we kind of embraced it and went with it, and we encouraged them. We know a lot about Stonehenge, but of course there's so much that we don't know about the site. And so that meant that the young people and the artists could really dream together. So I'm going to show you a very short clip of the film, so you can see I think you can see the full version as on YouTube, and I think the link is going to be in the chat following this. And we're going to do, but just to give you a little sense, and to frame it, the film is set in 3019, so 1,000 years from last year. And the main character in the film is a woman who works at Stonehenge and who kind of manages what's left of the stones in 1,000 years, when lots of things have changed. And so in this future experience, visitors to Stonehenge are given a headset that allows them to visit any date and travel back in time, like 1,000 years, to see what Stonehenge was like at any of that time period between the day they visited and 1,000 years before then. And so in the clip you're seeing, what you're going to see are sort of seeing and hearing what this employee sees as she explores a date in April 2019, when a group of people who she calls hengelings visited Stonehenge and kind of let their imaginations run wild. So hopefully the video is going to work, and I'll show you that. So here we go.
The birds are spying on the humans. They're working for the aliens.
The gaps between the stones are portals. If you're here at the right time, you can walk through to another dimension.
All we know is that it's about the longest day and the shortest day.
We've set the gravity core to go no further back than this morning, this small moment 1,000 years ago, but I wish I could find out what brought them here. So, in the night, quietly, I go down to the core chamber. I reset the instrument panel just a little, just a flicker in the passage of time, to see a tiny bit further back.
So in order to find out what happens next, you're going to have to watch the video. Oops, sorry. This is a screen grab from one of the scenes in the film. So just again, to whet your appetite a little bit. And so what happens, what happens when she plays around with the instruments is something that you'll find out. You'll have to watch the video. It's only 15 minutes, well, it's less than 15 minutes actually. So, so there's that. And so why is this important and why is this interesting? For us, it really has big implications with the heritage sector. And it's significant for really two reasons. First, because it's kind of a totally radical departure from the traditional approach to community, youth heritage engagement, where a group of people will come to a site, have some feelings about it, tell us about it, and then we'll kind of weave that story into the history. This is an absolute complete departure from the history of Stonehenge, but it is absolutely really beneficial and helpful for visitors in terms of unlocking the history of Stonehenge, because it takes this idea of the visitor experience, of the heritage visit, and it creates that as being something which is interesting. And that really challenges a national heritage institution like ourselves to go beyond this idea of co-production and instead sort of offered people the opportunity to lead the development of new interpretation. And this is going to be installed at Stonehenge. So visitors to the site will see this alongside all of the other bits and pieces of interpretation that we do. So when we think about co-production, we usually mean work together to tell something which is truthful or something which is like the faithful history of a site. But what's unique about Stonehenge 3019 is that, well, maybe it's not so much co-production as the young people's voice leading the way. And as a piece of interpretation, it's definitely not something that we would have dreamt of doing. Rather than emphasizing the times when Stonehenge was being built or expanded, the film focused on a period when Stonehenge was a kind of visitor attraction, which arguably it has been for a much longer period of time than it was ever in use for. I know it's in use continuously since then, but the majority of visitors who go to Stonehenge now go there because it's on their bucket list and they see it as a kind of this amazing wonder place, and don't really they don't know that much about it, but it's important for humanity. So normally, as I say, we tell the histories of our sites from the moment they were built to the moment that they fell out of use. And they kind of live on in a sort of state of suspended animation and ruin. But what these young people have done is to demonstrate the importance of these sites as really living monuments, that which, although some stones might have fallen over, are still alive because people visit them and because visitors' imaginations are vibrant and important. And secondly, what's also important about this is that the film not only offers a kind of exciting and inspiring imagined future heritage landscape, it also challenges visitors to think differently about heritage. What is heritage? How is it shaped and who owns it? And I won't give away the film, but there's something really exciting in the sense of collective ownership of heritage that these young people map out. And so maybe ownership really isn't the right word because it's not about any particular person's idea. It's about the importance and critical mass of collective thought, delight, wonder, and imagination that gets mapped onto places of significance. And so is Stonehenge important today because it was important in the past? Or is it important today because of the collective memories, ideas, and experiences that people have had there and continue to have there? And so finally, this really raises an interesting, important questions about the role of heritage interpretation. Is it about informing? Is it about sparking imagination? Of course, it can do both, but at some level, Stonehenge exists because generations of people thought it was interesting and valuable enough not to dismantle for parts. And so when we tell its story, aren't the reasons why all of Stonehenge's visitors have made their trip there as important a part of the history of Stonehenge as the construction of the monument itself? And by giving up control of the project in this way, we've really created space for truly innovative interpretation that will surely delight our visitors from near and far, or for many years or even millennia to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominique. I think
websites and Twitters and things. So if anybody wants to follow our progress or get in touch or anything like that, please feel free to do that. I'm afraid you can't click on them. I keep trying to do that with my finger, but it doesn't work though.
We'll put all the links in the chat hopefully, and I'm sure everybody can jump on YouTube after and watch the film as well.
So would you like me to stop sharing, or and then we can go to the normal screen for everybody for the
we'll go back to the normal. Yeah, so that was really really interesting to see the youth involvement in the project. We struggled with that over the years. That it's very easy to engage older generations in heritage, but it's very different for the youth. And I think the creativity is really the entry point into that. And
it's been a real learning curve for us. We're not an organization that has, we do a lot of stuff with schools, but in terms of young people and youth engagement, it's been a learning curve. And that idea of giving up control has been challenging also. But we're figuring it out, and it's just work.
Yeah, I suppose once you let them loose, then they come up with the ideas, and they surprise you as well, I suppose, and just being open to that. So I suppose that kind of brings us on to, we talked about roles and ownership. So we can start going through the Q&A and maybe work through a few topics here. But so how did you create roles and manage expectations with? You must have worked with a lot of people, a lot of young people. How did you create their roles and kind of manage their expectations? And what did you see with the ownership of the project that developed?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, sorry.
Everybody's going to have different answers, I'm sure. I'll keep it. I think. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry to you, Dominique, and then we can throw it out there to everybody.
I think for us, we want to. We don't make it about. It's about. I think, as Sarah said, as Judith said, it's about the journey as much as probably even more so than it is about the outcome. Although the outcome is incredibly important, because a lot of people who engage with museums, particularly those people who are kind of don't necessarily have the same kind of opportunities to participate in heritage or feel excluded. And that's certainly the case in the sorts of rural communities I know that Judith works in, and that idea that you can just kind of get dropped at the end of a project can be really challenging. So for us, it's about working with existing youth organizations and sort of rowing in behind them and supporting them. And by doing that, you not only support the young people, but you actually develop the capacity of the youth leaders to engage with heritage in the future. So it's really important that they have. It's about an ecology, and it's about strengthening that ecology and reinforcing it. And we're a very big fish, and so when we go someplace and decide to do a project, it can create really big waves, and organizations, other heritage organizations, arts organizations, youth organizations that have worked really hard to sort of knit together all the very fragile strands of the ecology that they work with can be disrupted by us kind of belly flopping in. And so what we do is try to work very, very carefully with the existing infrastructure and then kind of shoring it up so that after the project is over and we might leave, actually what's left behind is an amazing project, but also the kinds of youth work professionals, community development, social development professionals have gained new skills in working with heritage, so that potentially in future they can go out and find another organization, another museum, and they can take more control of that process of storytelling. And that I think is really, really important.
Yeah, all that work translates over different generations, and those practitioners can replicate the work. And yeah, I think that's really important for the legacy of all these projects. So maybe Sarah, would you have anything on how you create roles as well because you've worked with a different kind of sector of society?
Sorry, yes, I have, and I will answer now. I just had to say good hello to my daughter who just come home from school. So yes, we do these co-productive and collaborative and participatory projects, and all these fancy words that is for me sort of part of the same thing. It connects to the usefulness and the relevance and the development of the museum itself, just to make that point once more. So we have collaborations with students from schools, with these people who we term sometimes alternative experts, other times authentic experts, other times just collaborators. And there are different ways that that it's relevant for them to take part of these projects. And just to give two examples, I would say that one of the types of roles that I actually would prefer not to term it as, but as the collaboration itself, is when they are co-researching with us. And this is connected to us working with welfare state history on the systemic and the legal side of the welfare state has been described for a long time, for many years. So many brilliant research projects has been connected to that. But the focus on the authentic, the lived experience as an equal partner in understanding welfare state history is, well, that's a new thing. And just to give one example, when you as an adult who used to be a child in an institution want to look into your own story, you go to the archives, because that's where your stories are represented when you have been when you have been a state warden. But it's not your voice that you find there. If you find the records, if they are preserved, if you can get access, the voices there and the knowledge will again be the voices and the knowledge from the system. So what we are, just to give one example, what we are collaborating with these people who have been in care as children is, how can we combine this knowledge from these people, this lived experience, how can that be part of the archival material for the future, because just like Dominic said, it's a process in time, whether it's Stonehenge or it's the Danish welfare state. We are understanding it from different times that we are debating and sharing and researching it in. So that has really moved us forward as an institution, that it was relevant for these people to collaborate with the museum in both accessing the files, but co-researching with us in, well, the accessibility, but also co-producing and co-researching with us in connecting their knowledge to the archival material. That was just one, and then a brief other example. Some of the people, and as Henrik was profiled, just to give or described, and he was taking the stage himself in the small video. He himself, just as well as other people, they say we want to collaborate with the museum, because being able to just stand up and share some of the really tough sides of your past to an audience, that really has to, you really need support, and you need some of the capabilities that a museum represents. So it's forming a narrative. Just to give an example, just being supported in how do you stand up and deliver, for example, a speech. So some of the capabilities, some of the knowledge that is combined in a museum can be used for them in taking over the control of their story and knowing how will I represent this for my future. And what they don't need, well, some of them do, but they're not asking the museum to do it. They're not coming to us for therapy. That's such an important point for me to make here. They're coming here because they want to contribute, whether it's these care leavers wanting to contribute to us, to our knowledge as co-researchers, but they're also wanting to contribute in saying, my story is also important. I want to share it. I want to be trained in how can I share it, but the story is mine. And it has a therapeutic aspect, this co-production, but they're not asking us to be a place for therapy. I hope that distinction is somewhat clear in the way that I describe it. But just to sum it up, because I've been speaking a lot, we don't say you have this and so and role for doing so and so. They come to us because they want to collaborate for the very reason that it's relevant for them in that very point in time that they're in. Short answer from the Danish person.
Thank you. So there's a lot of relationships that you have to manage in that process as well. So I can
yes,
see
but I actually wrote here, because we were given this answer, this question before. That you say there's you're asking about the relationship that we have to manage. Well, we are a workplace with a number of different people that we work together to produce different kind of projects. So we are colleagues, and we meet each other as colleagues. And the way that I would collaborate with a fellow curator is the way that I would collaborate with a fellow authentic experts, because we're all sharing a bit of us in this passionate work that is museum work. So we don't have strategy work in how can I do this in the proper way and politically correct. So we are just human beings working together on these very important issues. But we're not naive, just to say. We're not naive, we're doing it with wholehearted, and we do sometimes have to collaborate with, for example, psychologists to debrief and so on, because this is top stories that we are sharing. But so would it be with an ordinary colleague.
I can see our CINE partners nodding along too. So we have Judith in Ireland, Scully in Iceland, and Anna in Norway. maybe they can speak to how they manage relationships and some of the divisive topics that can come up in co-production. Maybe hand over to Judith. Maybe you could talk about your relationships, expectations, and divisive topics that you've encountered.
No, goodness me, there'd be none of those at all. I think what Sarah is saying is where we would like to be. I'm not sure we're necessarily there yet in terms of how we collaborate. We're probably at the beginning of this process of learning about co-production and learning to work with our communities. I mean, we've been working with communities for years. I'm over 20 years working in the museum, but it's always been more on a sort of contributory basis or a collaborative basis rather than co-production. So that in that instance, there's more managing of relationships because you're not necessarily coming to it, or you don't see yourself coming to it as equal. But the process of co-production is that you are equal. That's the whole point, is there are no experts. We have skills, but so do the other people that we're working with have skills, and we're all bringing them together to whatever this process or project or thing that we're doing. It's about working together. So it's how you would manage anything, any situation, any event that you're doing. So but we're at an earlier stage than you are, so we do have still have had those kind of situations where we're like, okay, now I'm not really sure how we're going to move forward with this, because we have different expectations or we have different ideas of where we're going with it. And so maybe we need to step back again and start from the beginning again in terms of where we're going. So it's a work in progress, and I've already made a few notes in terms of where we might go in the future with projects that we might do, or co-production processes that we might do. So it's been really interesting. Thank you.
Dominique, you're...
I actually have a question that I wanted to ask Sarah, which was about quite a while ago, sort of earlier on in my career, I used to do a lot of work with ex-prisoners and paramilitaries in Northern Ireland doing heritage projects. And something that you mentioned really struck a note with me, which was the kind of sometimes when you're working with groups that have very, very complex lives and people have, complex problems, that can take a real toll on the museum staff or the heritage staff that's working with those communities, because we're not trained social. I mean, some people are, but I'm not a trained social worker. I'm a historian, and I was wondering if you could, how that comes up, because and how that works with a collegial style relationship. I think a lot of the work that I used to do in Northern Ireland was very collaborative, but that power gradient, that power dynamic between the heritage institution and the community group is really, really hard to level off. And it sounds like you guys do a brilliant job of doing it. But if you've got that, but how do you balance that with sometimes having to balance your own sort of sense of personal well-being when you're working with people who have really, really serious issues sometimes, and those issues can come up in these situations because you're creating space for them to share their voices and experiences.
What a brilliant question, and thank you for the nice words. That really empowers me in this co-productive setting we are in. Well, I will say that both myself and my colleagues, the trained museum professionals, but also my colleagues who themselves are people with lived experience, because we what we have done is we've said I could give the example. We drink coffee, we have our lunch together. It's completely embedded in the everyday life at the museum, whether it's a high-profile research project or whether it's a school project with local children, which are collaborating with us on. So no matter what, if it's a colleague which is a trained professional, a historian, or it's a colleague with this lived experience background, we do two primary things, and this is gold nuggets in co-production from me to you. One, we talk to each other. It's not to make it more simple as it is, but it's using your colleagues to debrief. It's so important. We do it in a Danish context. I say we do it on ordinary workplaces. Why not do it? Why not just combine that with how we do it at the Welfare Museum? So we talk to each other about the tough stories, but the way that we talk to each other about it and debate it is, and that's for me the number two message that I also deliver to myself, is that I have to continuously turn the story upside down. So I'm actually not listening to a victim sharing tough abuse stories of which has created so many tragic side effects in this person's adult life. I'm actually listening to a survivor. I'm actually listening to a person who is strong, who has brave, who is brave, who has chosen to share that story with us and with the museum, because strength comes in numerous versions, and sometimes the way that we understand as trained historians and professionals, the way that we detect strength, maybe we need to challenge that with ourselves. So it's not to neglect that these are people with harsh stories, which are open wounds. But if we just listen, if we talk to each other, and if we understand that the why are they sharing this with us? It is because they want the story not to repeat itself for future generations. And that's that. In that way, in that setting, it transforms the way that I encounter these people, the way that I meet them. They become the people. So I sometimes say that I'm actually their staff member. They are the ones who actually are the head of the museum. I'm just doing the groundwork, because they're the true heroes, and they're the true directors, and also of me. And have I and my colleagues have had incidents where this really struck a chord? Yes, and it strikes a chord when for example, if it's a story which refers to a child which is the same age as my children, oh, that really gets to me. But then again, what do? I talk to colleagues and my family about it, and I look at these people as, wow, just it's amazing that you're sharing this with me, because we are, and again, this is a we in a Danish context. We are a lot of times we are victimizing people instead of looking at the resource that they're actually contributing to us. Yeah, sorry. I don't do short answers. I'm sorry. I will do brief.
Well, it seems like listening is the most powerful tool in the.
Oh yeah, and I do that
nowadays.
I talk a lot, but I do listen. Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Niall.
No, it's very interesting. I mean, that's what when we worked with the Inch community, a lot of the guy that did the facilitating on it, his skill was listening. He's very charismatic, but he's a very good listener. Spent a lot of time with people, just hearing their stories and becoming part of the story, I suppose, and becoming part of people's lives. And you mentioned about the culture in Denmark, so maybe we could throw that question out about, is there cultural differences between different countries? I mean, we're looking at the Scandinavian, UK, Ireland kind of area in this project. So is there any cultural differences in co-production across those regions? I'll just throw that out there to anybody who thinks they can contribute.
I can grab it. Over to Iceland with that question, and I would like to begin with saying that it's very, very inspiring to hear the presentations about the projects there of Dominic and Sarah, especially, and it's not least here for me being in Iceland, where I find, well, we are quite behind in co-production in relation with cultural heritage, and I don't know why it is, but it is. It's not like there's no tradition, I would say, of co-producing more than maybe small exhibitions or something like that, more like a collaboration with the communities here in Iceland. But I don't know the reason. It's somehow that when we were with the heritage here in Iceland, that if if I would like to visualize it, it's maybe that 50 years ago, there were staff members from the heritage museums, and they came to the communities and they went door from door and asking for, do we have something to contribute to our heritage museum? And then they took it, and that is somehow they got some items, and then that was stored in the museum, and that somehow just took the heritage from the people and left it in the museum, and then the people just, well, it's the responsibility of the museum to think about the heritage. We don't have to do that, but it was maybe okay decades ago, but I think what we are seeing now is actually what Dominic was one of the aims with the project there. Their project is to empower the young people and have new heritage leaders for the future, and all these things, the global system that we live in now, that relates to that, and well, one of the things that happens is, like Dominic said, there's no, you don't have you don't have a place that you call home. I mean, the people that have been brought up in the last 20-30 years, the whole world is their home in a way. So then you don't have relation with a special place with a special heritage more than any other place where you have been living or working. And and then also in the rural and remote areas here in most countries, we see that people are just getting older. The younger generations, they just move abroad and don't come back except for on holidays or something like that. So I find that the co-production is very, very important thing to have the heritage sector in Iceland more to think about, because it shows, well, projects like we've been talking about here and presenting, they show that it really matters. You can get so much out of the co-production, and this question, who owns the heritage, and what is the heritage? I mean, it's something that is relevant to have today, especially in this twisted and mixed world that we are living in, and we cannot allow ourselves to just somehow isolate the heritage from the community, as I find we have been doing too much of here in Iceland. And I really envy, for example, the British Isles of the culture of co-production, and hopefully we will get better in it here in Iceland in the future, in the near future.
Yeah, I think Sarah, you've got your hand up there. Do you want to?
I just wanted to add that this has also been a process for the museum, stepping up the co-productive initiatives. But sometimes when people ask me, doesn't it get quite political? And I can just see they go, is this political? And I say, yes, it is. It's socio-political. We are part of the world that we're in when we're showing this. This underlines the ethical grounding of the museum. But just to turn it over to the more the side that is also very easily detected as a success or a failure. The more that we are co-producing the museum, the higher our visitor numbers are. The more we are co-producing the museum, the better and the more ambitious research project are we doing. So I'm just saying, the more co-production that we are doing in developing the museum, the more success we are experiencing on the setting that I think is also morally more empowering for me than if we're just doing it for the what the cash numbers are in the ticket office. So I can mirror what Scully is also saying about this. This was also the deal going back 3-4 decades in Danish in a Danish museum context. But a lot of both my colleagues at the museum, but also other colleagues, they can see now that it has opportunities just to be relevant, but also to expand how we work at museums.
Niall, you were asking about the sort of different perspectives from different countries. And at this point, I would really like to bring in my colleague Maria from Noland Academy, if I translated Noland, the Academy of Art and Knowledge, because she has been working a lot with communities within art projects. And I think there is a question from Dominique about Scandinavian countries that is really relevant to Maria's work. And Dominique, I wondered if you could ask yourself.
Yeah, of course. So I've always felt like I had a sense that Nordic countries have a more sort of egalitarian approach to society, and so in some sense that idea of the kind of feeling of disenfranchisement from the dominant culture feels like it would be less marked maybe than in some places where there's a much broader range of identities, of heritages, and sometimes those heritages can be oppositional in a way. And I wondered, my feeling, or I would wonder whether that would make co-production a little easier, actually more prevalent, because that sense of the kind of the sort of hegemonic monopoly that museums have over identity is actually feels a little easier to overcome maybe. But I guess I could, of course, I'm probably wrong.
Well, thanks for that question, and thank you for letting me join, and thank you so much for the talks. I've learned so much already. Really food for thoughts, and it's a very useful exercise to listen. And well, I represent a private foundation that's been running for over 30 years, and we're not a museum, but we're working closely with museums and Museum Nord, of course. So we've been, we communicate art and culture to audiences, and we have been involved with the local communities since the 1980s in so-called place development. So we're part of a very small community on an island, but always sort of looked at the larger whole. And Well, the sun doesn't always shine on voluntary work. It's a success that comes and goes. And it's people depending, it's knowledge depending. And it also comes down to good leadership. And back to your question, yes, you might be right. I think there's a lot of truth in it, but it's amazing how quickly you can institutionalize things as well, and maybe make it more difficult to join maybe. But we have always sort of been about creating meeting places between professionals and amateurs. So there's always been an environment for sharing thoughts and ideas, and you get this, well, with it, we operate in a lot of different genres. So for instance, within chamber music or classical music side of things, you know, we've always had children involved. So you have professionals coming in working with children or adult amateurs, and the atmosphere that creates is quite amazing. Yeah, and maybe because it's an equal society, it might have been easier to do, and it's also an act to follow. So it's a good thing to look back as well. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
You touched upon the cross-generational learning opportunities. So that's a very powerful tool to kind of mix people together, and we find in work we did that when you put an older person with a younger person, the younger person has the digital skills, the older person has the heritage, and that makes a conversation happen. And sometimes we give them things like VR, and then that automatically, makes them sort of talk about what they're experiencing or what they're looking at.
But also when you have sort of adults meeting, an expert or a scholar, a professor of philosophy or whatever, literature, art, engaging with the local audience that have the interest and maybe self-taught or read a bit, or might be academics for that, you get a very good mix. That makes for a good debate.
So we were talking about the differences in culture then as well. So maybe on the side of Ireland, or we have different socio-political problems. Is that something that's different across? And Dominique, you worked in Northern Ireland, so you probably are more aware of the complicated discussions here.
In museums in Northern Ireland, was on the peace process and working with ex-prisoners and paramilitaries. And then in the South, I worked in Limerick, which is Ireland's most socioeconomically deprived city, which back when I worked there was 25% unemployment, but there were pockets of the city that were over 50% unemployed. And, some with people in some families where nobody in living memory had any kind of steady job. And that creates a lot of challenges in relation to culture. I also spent 2 years working in Hong Kong, and that's another place where, of course, history and heritage are very much are very politicized in a way. So I think in all of these places, access to culture or the ability to tell one's story is a marker of power in some way. And if you can tell your story, or you see a story that's like yours reflected back at you, whether it's on television or in a heritage site or something like that, that's a really affirming thing. And that's kind of bread and butter in some ways for heritage. We tell stories about who built a big castle, and if you built a big castle, then you had the funds to build it, and you that sort of thing. I think where where heritage narratives are not dominated by the state and by political control, by major political organizations, you have a lot, it's a lot easier for heritage institutions or museums to get involved in co-production, where the historical narratives that define identity, and that's in Northern Ireland very much. Increasingly, that's in Britain, and that is also very much the case in Hong Kong. We see this in many other places. It becomes a kind of a political negotiation in some sense to try to negotiate these various threads of identity, because everybody's entitled to sort of feel a connection to the past. But where that can go wrong is when one person's story when history becomes a zero-sum game. And, you know, in telling one person's story, that means that somebody else's story and lived experience is negated. And I think that Sarah particularly spoke extremely well about the importance of lived experience and the value and the way heritage institutions value lived experience. And I think that where co-production really is at its best is when the museum does the thing that it's best at, which is knowing about history and objects and that sort of thing, and where that can be married up with the desire for individuals or communities to communicate their story. And when you're dealing with a situation where that story itself is contested, very much like it is in Northern Ireland, where, you know, one community could tell you about something that happened in sort of the First World War, another community can talk about the same thing, and you wouldn't know they were talking about the same event at all. That is where I think it's really important that people acknowledge the existence of other perspectives, because history there's not like one historian of the Normans or like one historian of the Renaissance. History is a multiplicity of perspectives and ideas, and they all reside and rub up against each other in a way which is sometimes comfortable and sometimes uncomfortable. But I think there's a perception that the heritage sector or museums, that we tell one story and somehow that's a monolithic story. And we're kind of victims in this sense, because you can't put two stories on a panel. You know, it's just a panel. You can't say, it's very difficult. So the tools that we have for interpretation, I think, really need to be rethought in really exciting ways, so that we can remind people that this is all a work in progress. This is all in flux, and that you know, everybody's got a right in some sense to their own understanding of the past, but that cannot be at the expense of somebody else's sense of who they are. And the challenges that I think we see coming up over and over again in heritage is that sense of anxiety, I think, that people have, that their own sense of identity is being challenged by somebody else talking about what the past means to them. And that is a very, very difficult thing for us to be engaging with. But the more we can work with people, work with communities, work with people who don't have the chance to tell their stories, and work with people whose stories do get told, you know, it's got to be something that's it's collective in a sense. But that doesn't mean collapsing nuance. It means enhancing nuance, shining a light on nuance, shining a light on complexity. And I think that is where these sorts of projects allow us to go, because, you know, we can release ourselves from the obligation to do that by supporting loads of people in telling their stories for themselves. And as long as those things are factual and factually correct and historically rigorous, then I think we can create that space.
So Sarah's got her thumb up here. So do you have anything? Do you have one last point to add to that, Sarah? And then we'll wrap it up.
This was the emoji. Can you see?
Yeah. All right.
But since I unmuted myself, I just had one. I just wanted to say that I think not doing co-production is counterproductive. We need to do it. It's the right way forward.
I feel like if this conference was in real life, we'd be totally at the bar until 2 a.m. tonight, Sarah.
I'm with you.
We're co-producing our hangovers, I think. So I think we're at the end of the time here. So I think we'll wrap it up. I'd like to thank all the speakers, Judith, Sarah, and Dominique. That was really inspirational talks, and some amazing things to think about, and some really inspirational. I mean, it's really inspirational to see museums and these topics being at the forefront of society and the opportunities there are in the future. And we also didn't have to talk about COVID for once, so that was a plus, I think. So thank you to everyone. I'll hand back over to Anna here for the last word.
Okay, thank you, Niall. Also, a big thanks to our Facebook audience. It's been really nice to see that you've been watching and putting a lot of comments into the comment section. So that's something to look back at on as well. Thank you also to Catherine, Maria, and Scully from our partnership or extended partnership to come into the panel discussion here today. It's been a really interesting journey, and one that I think we could extend for a lot longer. But there's always an end to these events. We have another one coming up next week at the same time, and this is about reviewing curatorial practice. And our speakers include Abira Hussain from the University College of London with a talk on the archive and the community. We also have Zubas Bugu, arts manager at the British Council in Turkey, thinking outside the white cube, talking about online and digital exhibitions. And also Jackie Aitken from Timespan in Scotland, considering using immersive digital technology to mobilize heritage for social change. So you can see that some of the topics of today might be picked up next time. At the same time as well, and hopefully this time punctual. I apologize for the hiccups at the beginning of our session. So we have taken a little bit more time at the end. I hope that that was okay. Thanks for watching this event, and we really hope to see you again next week. We will show a very short 2-minute film from the case study site in Ireland from Killybegs and Catherine's that Niall has prepared. And also, as we have been mentioning in our event, the video from Stonehenge will be available on the Facebook page right after our event. So please do keep on that and watch it. It's really worth watching. So yeah, please have a look at that from us today. Goodbye, and I will be putting on this final last video now.